It's on now.
Baton Rouge, it's official. National recording artist Webby and the Savage Squad have teamed up with the hottest clothing line in BR. Authentic BR-225 gear, aka Jake City Clothing. The gear is hot, it's fresh, it's what's up. You have many styles to choose from. Tall tees, short and long sleeve. Authentic fitted baseball caps and embroidered polo style shirts with the BR logo. You can be officially repped out in BR-225 gear. So rep your hood. That's BR-225 gear. Get you some. Oops, I almost forgot. Bootleg this.
Crossroads presents George Washington Carver. Scientist and agricultural researcher, he developed hundreds of products from the peanut and the sweet potato.
And welcome back to Crossroads. I'm Isaiah Carey, and we have with us in this segment Chairman of the History Department of Southern University, Dr. Raymond Lockett, and we'd like to welcome Dr. Lockett to the program. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
The first question many people are wondering is, did all African Americans have a past, a history of coming from slaves here in America?
The great majority of African Americans can trace their ancestry back to the system of slavery. However, at the beginning of African American or Africans coming to what is now the present United States, they did not come, the first group did not come as slaves. They came as indentured servants, and after working for a period of time, they got their freedom. But once Virginia enacted the laws for setting up a system of slavery in the United States, the Africans who came over afterward were slaves. We could also note that there was a period of time when we had a group of Africans to come in from Santo Domingo. After Toussaint Louverture had his revolt there, we're going to see a group of Africans coming into New Orleans. Some people might say, well, they were not slaves, but they were slaves when they were in Santo Domingo. So we cannot discount that part of their ancestry.
Where did the history get lost?
Well, you see, if we take that view, then people could put African Americans down and say your history started in the belly of a slave ship. But in order to talk about the history of the African American, it is necessary for us to go back to Mother Africa and talk about his history or her history prior to coming to America. And once we do this, then we're going to talk about the glorious history that existed then. So we're going to have to go back, number one, starting with Egypt. We're going to have to start with the cradle of civilization, which was in Africa.
Dr. Lockett, looking back at all the technology and all the advancement that the Egyptians had, why would they even consider coming to America as Africans?
I think we would note that the Africans did not leave their country voluntarily. That the Africans who came over here were brought over here by force, either by force of someone selling them into slavery or by force of someone capturing them over here. The Africans were not standing on the shore waving, say, take me. At least to the contrary, many of them committed suicide rather than come over.
And so when we look back on it, when was the period of time that we saw more Africans coming over to America in not, say, a slave trade or possibly an indentured slave or indentured servant, rather, or just on free will before the modern 20th century?
If you're talking about free will, then you're going to talk about probably in the 1920s when they started coming over as students. They came over to get an education, and most of them went back to Africa. Prior to that, you had laws in the United States that did not permit them to come into this country. See, we had our arms open, and when I say we, I'm talking about the United States, talking about bringing everyone in, but they didn't mean that the Africans came in as slaves, but to immigrate, to migrate freely to the United States, this was not open to them at that time.
And so when they did come here, during the period of them coming as possibly indentured servants, not being considered technically slaves, we saw a period in Virginia where they were turned into slaves. What were some of the things that they went through here in our country, in America, when they were considered indentured servants and not slaves?
As indentured servants, they were like other indentured servants with a couple of things, with the exception of a couple of things. They were not free to travel where they want to and come and go where they want when they wanted to. There were certain laws that if they broke the law, then they would be servants forever. Where other indentured servants probably had a few years added to their time, the Africans who were here, if they committed the same act, then they became indentured servants forever.
We're dispelling the myth that all Africans came here as slaves, but is it bad to know that your ancestors may have been slaves?
It is not bad, and we should not be ashamed of this, because as I mentioned earlier, we should look at this as a short period in our history. And what we should do is concentrate on our history prior to coming here as slaves. Because even when we came here as slaves, we showed that we were strong people, because many people would have cracked up under the things we had to endure as slaves. So the mere fact that we were strong enough to survive the system of slavery should be one thing we should be proud of. But the next thing we should be proud of is the fact that the system of slavery is not our history. Our history goes back much further than this, and back to Mother Africa itself.
Why is it important that we as African Americans trace our roots, and how beneficial is it to us?
Oh, it's very important if we can. It's very important if we can trace our roots back to where we really came from. Just like it's important for every other nationality to trace their roots back to where they came from. I don't think we should be ashamed that in that for a short period, and I'm talking about a short period, I'm talking about hundreds of years now, but for a short period that our forefathers were slaves. You know, this was a part of the history. If we stop there, if this is the only thing we can tell our children, then we are saying we had no history other than that from the belly of a slave ship. But if we tell our children we did suffer through the system of slavery, but let us look at our history prior to the system of slavery. And then we could start talking about all of the great civilization. And we could mention to our children that in the 1200, that in the Empire of Mali, we had two great universities. In the 1200s, before the Europeans ever went there, that there was a university at Sankore in Timbuktu, and that there was another university in Jena. And at the university in Jena, they were specializing in medicine. So we're not talking about the things that the Western writers would like to have us to believe, that our forefathers were brought over here because they were savages. We were not savages.
Dr. Lockett, we'd like to thank you for being on Crossroads today.
Thank you for having me, Isaac.
We'll be back with more Crossroads after this break. Stay with me.
Crossroads presents Marcus Garvey. Orator and black nationalist, he organized America's first real black mass movement and articulated a new vision of African independence.